I learned a great many lessons. And yes, there is indeed a benefit from failure. We will be the first to admit that there were difficulties with some policies. We have learned our lessons, and we promise Ghanaians we will do even better.
Former President John Mahama says he has learnt his lesson, is ready to do better as he makes a passionate pitch, detailing why he is qualified to lead this country again.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
And Top Story is always brought to you by Bond, is also brought to you by Gasem Cement, the nation builder. Vodafone, the future is exciting, ready, and nationwide health insurance. Behold the new John Mahama, a man who says he has learnt his lessons and is ready to do better. A man who admits there is indeed a benefit from failure. The former president today returned his nomination forms and paid the 300,000 cedis required to contest in the NDC presidential primaries. After months of quiet campaigning, John Mahama addressed an assembly of his supporters and a host of journalists to formally state his reasons for seeking another opportunity to occupy the Jubilee House.
The loss afforded me the opportunity for a solemn reflection about a life spent in public service in many different parts. I have been blessed to play a part in Ghana's story. I found myself grateful. My brothers and sisters, let me be clear. I myself do not claim perfection. While we remain proud of our record in government and the work we were able to do, we will be the first to admit that there were difficulties with some policies, though well-intentioned, were perhaps misunderstood and could have been implemented differently in order to get better and different outcomes. Those difficulties and lessons drawn from them will inform the formulation and implementation of our future policies when Ghanaians return us to power. We have learnt our lessons, and we promise Ghanaians we will do even better.
He also details what will be different about the John Mahama going into the 2020 elections.
I will not engage in empty promises, sloganeering, populism, convenient lies, and grand deception to win political power. I will not do that. I may not always say what Ghanaians want to hear. I may not always say what you want to hear, but I will always speak the truth. Every government faces challenges, and the best way to deal with these challenges is to be honest and truthful to the citizens of your nation. Because if you are truthful and honest and they understand the challenges that the government is going through, they are prepared to stand by you in resolving those issues. I, John Dramani Mahama, I hold Ghanaians in such respect that I will never lie and pretend to them that our situation is good when it is otherwise. I don't promise, I prove, and I deliver.
To those who accuse him of failing whilst he was the president, he says there is indeed a benefit from failure.
I also truly respect and equally appreciate the views of those who, whether in the public space or in private conversations, express some misgivings about my decision to re-enter the political contest. I wish for all such persons to know that their advice was not lost on me and that I indeed intend to prove myself worthy of their confidence and to assuage their fears in the months ahead. I don't promise, I prove. I'm running because even though we did not succeed in 2016, I learned a great many lessons. And yes, there is indeed a benefit from failure.
He says he's ready to lead again.
The current government has had to hijack some of our projects to commission and recommission all over the place to be able to show something to the Ghanaian people. Our government prized principle over popularity and endeavored to make decisions about every peso borrowed on those grounds of principle. Today, Ghanaians pay far more for fuel and transportation than they paid under the NDC. Unemployment among our youth continued to rise against the backdrop of bankruptcy and collapsing businesses. Importers were promised easier times with reduction on import duties. They've ended up paying far more than they ever paid under the NDC administration. Business associations continue to wail at the impact of the plethora of taxes they are being subjected to. Our people are suffering. Rising poverty levels is creating anxiety, stress, and depression. We knew the NPP had no intention of honoring its lofty promises, but the extent of retrogression is simply unbelievable. We cannot in good conscience let the current state of affairs continue without standing up to do our part. And so, my brothers and sisters, I am ready. I am very ready.
So that's John Dramani Mahama there, making that strong, passionate pitch today, laying out why he believes he's qualified to lead the country again. And he also had some words for the NPP.
Together, we will present our countrymen and women a renewed and reinvigorated NDC, a party ready and able to lead Ghana beyond the unprecedented economic hardships of the present hour, beyond the rising unemployment and despair of our youth, beyond the closure and collapse of financial institutions and businesses, beyond the dishonesty and nonchalance of the current administration, and beyond the family and clan syndrome that has rightly shocked and outraged so many in its scope and scale. My brothers and sisters, let me tell you something. The NPP has been in power for close to 2 years. They began their tenure with a groundswell of goodwill from Ghanaians who believed that they would keep faith with them and deliver on the litany of promises they had doled out during the campaign of 2016. The cracks in the foundation are beginning to show, and the cracks are growing by the day.
We'll be speaking to the man who has been within the John Mahama campaign today, has been leading it for quite some time now. Ambassador Jakum shortly. But on the telephone line with me, as we work the phone lines to try and get him on, let's just speak to analyst with the University of Ghana Business School, Dr. Kobi Mensah. Joins us on the telephone line right now. Doc, thank you for your time here on Top Story.
Thank you, Evan. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and shortly we'll also be hearing from the other aspirants who returned their forms today and paid the 300,000 cedis. They also been making their own points today as they pick their forms. Doc, give me your reaction to John Dramani Mahama today.
Well, Evans, I think that's a bold move, a very, very bold move for owning up, the failure of the NDC in the last election. Clearly, not everybody thinks that they actually, failed. But of course, he admitted that for those who even thought that they failed, no matter how insignificant the number could be, he actually owned up. And then, of course, he set out, his campaign to say that you're not going to engage in empty promises. You're not going to engage in any lofty ideas. They will be straightforward with Ghanaians, etc. I think these are fine words. But of course, as politicians, as we know, would he be able to hold on to those words when the time comes? When you are faced with a competition and with your competitor perhaps making very bold claims. I don't know whether politicians can resist the attempt of going that line. But of course, these are very bold positions going forward.
You said bold decisions. In fact, to hear a politician say, and I want to quote here, I learnt a great many lessons, and yes, there is indeed a benefit from failure. Is that something a politician should be admitting when you want to do a comeback?
Well, I suppose he was trying to speak to predominantly the middle class, which for me I think was very crucial in the last elections. If you look at the way the election went, significantly it was a middle class election where Baumia actually represented the middle class, fed the middle class with some kind of economic narrative. And of course, the middle class actually bought into it. The majority of that particular class perhaps think that Mahama didn't actually, do well. So perhaps he's actually speaking to that particular class. Obviously, you want to be very careful not to, give ammunition to your opposing, party to say that, well, admittedly, if you claim that you failed, why do you want a second, comeback? So I think they have to be strategic in the way they manage that particular narrative. Otherwise, it's going to come back and hit them hard. But of course, it's a very good and bold move if they have a way to defend that particular discussions when it comes to they facing the other, party. If they have a very good narrative to explain the rationale behind he admitting that perhaps there was a failure one way or the other, perhaps that would be a very good thing to do. But of course, they've got to actually prepare for that. Strategy is everything, Evan.
But that's the thing. Is this a good strategy? I mean, listen, I listened to him and I think he presented what the new John Mahama will look and sound like. He says that the new John Mahama will not lie to the people. He will be honest. The new John Mahama will not say things because it's popular, but will be principled. The new John Mahama will only say the truth, speak the truth. If that is the new John Mahama, even if he believes that there have been challenges in the past about his leadership, he has to admit it. I mean, and which is what he's done in saying that, listen, there's indeed benefit in failure. You can spin it a million ways against him, but isn't it consistent with the new John Mahama he presented today?
Well, I think that for me, if you want to look at the failure in many ways, you can actually identify it. First of all, you can talk about the fact that he wasn't bold enough to actually sanction some, personnel in his leadership that people thought that were actually being, kind of destructive. We have examples of that. Others would actually argue that, yes, you brought in quite a lot of development at the tail end of your administration. Why could you, if you could do it, why didn't you actually do it earlier? Perhaps you can actually, admit failure, not entirety, but to say that perhaps there are things that I could have actually done better. And that is what he called, a failure, or perhaps others have actually called it a failure. So for me, it depends on how they manage the conversation going forward. Obviously, others will say that you have admitted yourself that you failed. But of course, I don't think that he actually means a complete failure of his government. Perhaps a failure in the way that he actually handled certain things that he could actually handle it much, properly than what he did. Perhaps he can actually manage it that way. But of course, like you said, you want to be very careful that you don't arm your opposition, in order that they can come to you or they can come at you very hard in that sense that you couldn't actually, get yourself out of it. Yeah.
And so for his opponents, and you've touched on this, and I guess one of the biggest things going forward is he's pitching this not only to the NDC delegates, but to the bigger audience, the electorate. One of the biggest hurdles he has to clear is, will they believe him? Will they say this is a genuine person? This is genuine. He's genuinely reformed. He's genuinely learned his lessons. And he says it, that because of those lessons, he will do better. Do you believe him when you hear him say all that he said and admit, yes, even if we failed, there's a benefit from that? Is that the biggest hurdle he has?
Yeah, I think, Evans, if you look at the political competition, it's always, as we say, the best out of the two enemies or the two devils. I mean, clearly, Mahama is actually, buoyant, and he's actually feeling it because he thinks perhaps the NPP and President Akufo-Addo haven't actually delivered the kind of Ghana they promised. Now, whether, Ghanaians will believe, his position or not, I think we leave to see. But I think that whether people would also believe him would also depend hugely on, Nanado's, 2 years, to come. Because clearly, if you listen to Ghanaians, majority of which we have actually interviewed, majority of which we have actually surveyed, most people don't think that, Akufo-Addo's government has actually delivered what they promised. And I think that's what is giving Mahama, for example, a huge mojo to think that he can actually come back and unseat Nana-Addo. Because majority of people don't think that the 18-month, transformation of Ghana had actually happened. And I'm sure that based on that, they think that they are in a very competitive, position. So if you compare Nana-Addo's, presidency at the time, and you compare John Mahama at the time, perhaps John Mahama is thinking that there's a room here to be trusted by the people because there's physical evidence that he can show. He can point to certain hospitals he built. He can point to certain roads he did. He can point to, for example, the Terminal 3 that he's done. Perhaps he feels that Nana-Addo hadn't been able to show that physical evidence. All that he can point to perhaps is free SHS. He can talk about a stable city and other things. So they feel very competitive right now. And he thinks that if he presents himself as a renewed Mahama who now has learned his lessons and shows some evidences of the things that he did, perhaps he can persuade the people to win the election.
Can you hold the line for me briefly? Because Dramani Mahama is returning all the forms. It's not the only thing that happened today. The other key challenges also did same today. Notably amongst them is Alabi and the others. My colleague Parker Wilson has been at the party's headquarters all day, joins me in the studio. Who returned their forms today?
So as you mentioned, Professor Joshua Alabi, Aban Barbin and Sylvester Mensah. So today the party received 4 nomination from these aspirants. And of course, they are ready to contest the presidential primaries. Evans. So let me start with Aban Barbin, who was at the party office, or probably the first aspirant to file his nomination. He indicated that his vision actually is to transform and restore the integrity of the party. And for him, if the NDC wants to win the 2020 election, then they would have to present the candidates, Aban Barbin.
Like you, I can't wait for the NDC to get back to the power we gave away in 2016. But for us to win election 2020, we must first win the battle for the soul of our party. For us to win election 2020, we must win election 2019 by electing Ask Babin in the primaries. We have a dire need as a party to beat a path back to our roots and to once again hold high the core values and principles that made the NDC the beacon of hope and the party of choice. Let us once again walk down the path of humility, love, care, kindness, fairness, and social justice. I pledge to reinvigorate and revitalize the party by bringing back the ideals that brought us together in the first place. And 2, I pledge to restore the power that has been taken away from the rank and file by empowering the branch and constituency members of the party to enable us win the 2020 general elections and remain in power for a minimum of 16 years.
So you had the current second Deputy Speaker of Parliament at Zimbabwe, and he talks about the grassroots of the party. John Mahama had a similar message today when he spoke to the press and his supporters. There was also Professor Joshua Alabi.
And looks like the candidates have almost similar messages, but Aban Barbin, adding on to restoration of the party's integrity, again mentioned that the NDC do have the man when it comes to governing this country. And for him, what he's going to do is that he's going to continue the legacy of former President John Evans Atta Mills. Now, that was when he was speaking to the press after submitting a nomination form. Now, he held a press conference, and at the press conference, he sought to take a swipe at the former President John Dramani Mahama, because I asked the question about...
This is Joshua Alabi?
Yeah, this is Joshua Alabi, exactly.
Going at John Mahama?
John Mahama. No, he wasn't too clear, but everything he said was pointing to the fact that he was referring to the former president, John Dramani Mahama, that the party is seeking to favor one candidate, and that candidate perhaps seems to be John Dramani Mahama. And for him, he believes that that move clearly means John Dramani Mahama is a weak candidate.
As to whether they are using resources to help one candidate, I don't think I'll be thinking the same way. It may be true, it may not be true. But what will be the use? When you decide to favor one particular candidate, if that is the case, then you know that that candidate is weak. If you have two children and they come from school with their homework, and one does his homework alone, and you, the father, you decide to do the homework for the other, then you know the other is weak. So I don't want to believe that they believe any of the aspirants is weak. I don't want to believe that way. If we have signs to that, maybe it might be an error which needs to be corrected. But I'm very confident that Professor Joshua Alabi is winning, and I'm already winning to be the flag bearer, but I'm winning by the grace of God to become the president of the Republic of Ghana. And I'm not only winning to become the president of the Republic of Ghana for one term, but I'm winning to become the president of the Republic of Ghana for 8 years, 2 terms. This gives opportunity to the rank and file. When I present myself for a second term, they will have questions for me. And that is what is going to push me to perform and fulfill the promises that I've been doing around. So I'm a very focused person. I'm not perturbed if anybody is being favored. I'm not worried. The most important thing is to send your message, your vision, to the members of the party. And it is sinking and sinking very well.
And that's Joshua Alabi there. And finally, to return forms today is
Sylvester Mensah. And for him, he expressed concerns about, again, the time frame for campaigning. He believes that it is too short a time for them to campaign to win the heart of delegates across the country. And he was actually appealing to the executives that if they can add some time to the poll process, he'll be happy.
My victory and our victory would precipitate a new dawn and a departure from the lack of political will, inertia, and drawbacks in the governance of this country. It is ideas that shape and change the world, and we believe we have it in more than enough measure to take both party and country forward. We're encouraged by a verse in the scripture that says, "The race is not for the swift, nor the battle for the strong."
And that's Sylvester Mensah, who also returned the forms today. And so a number of aspirants or flag bearer hopefuls picked the forms and paid the 20,000 cedis. Tomorrow is the deadline for returning of the forms. We have Stephen Atubiga picked forms. He's yet to return it. We have Guzitano. He picked forms. He's yet to return it. Who else?
Ekospio Gabra
also picked forms. He's yet to return it. Nurudin picked forms?
Yeah, he picked forms.
And yet to return. So we have 4 more hopefuls who have the next 24 hours to do so, or else they crash out of the race. Let's. I still have with me on the line Dr. Kobe Mensah, our analyst. Also joining us right now is a man speaks for the Professor Joshua Alabi campaign. Victor Dawudu, private legal practitioner. Thank you, gentlemen. Let me quickly, Dr. Kobe Mensah. These other hopefuls, do they stand a chance against John Dramani Mahama in this primary race?
Well, I suppose they rather stand a chance with him because, to be very honest with you, if you look at head-to-head competition between John and the other candidate, he's far off. I mean, they talk about the fact that the party set out to actually make him the leader. I don't think it's only the party itself, but I think the very people of the NDC. The NDC's base itself is actually set out, for John Mahama leadership. I mean, to be very honest, monitoring these campaigns, it looks as though they've been orphaned, by them. I mean, you first of all call on to your base if you want to win election. And to be honest, the base looks to be, behind John Mahama. So perhaps they have a chance with him, but not against him, no.
I'm grateful that you joined us. Let's quickly get the thoughts of paralegal practitioner Victor Daudu, who speaks for Professor Joshua Alabi's campaign. Mr. Daudu, do you agree with that assessment that the base that you need to win is strongly behind John Mahama and not your candidate?
I think the base that we need to win this, let me say good evening to our cherished listeners. But if we have to win this, I think it hinges on the grassroots. And who are the people who form the grassroots? It is the branch executives and the constituency executives. We have a lot of grassroots that the message that goes to them, and when they analyze the messages, it is different from what we hear on the airwaves and in the social media. So I know that people who make a difference in this are the branches and the constituency.
I needless to say, you're confident, in spite of the perceived bias, that your candidate will win.
No, you see, I'm very confident in our candidate because what do we have? What is our strength? Is our message, and the message that goes to the grassroots. Anytime we speak to the grassroots and we speak to them about our party, what we believe should be done to our members who have been branch members, branch executives, that there needs to be a change, and we are saying that that change should reflect in their living, how they live their life and others. So we believe that the grassroots are yearning for that change, and there are other people who also believe that, yes, let's go with it. Once the message gets to the grassroots, and that is where is our strength and our focus, not really as much as in the media. We believe that. Now, let me respond to one issue. I think
and very briefly, because I need to wrap up on this.
Yes, he said what he said was taken swipe at President John Dramani Mahama. I don't think that our candidate made so. It was in response to a question, and he said that if a system is backing somebody, then it
shows that person's weakness.
That person might be a weak.
Okay.
But we never referred to
John Mahama. I'm grateful that you joined us. That's Victor Daudu, paralegal practitioner. This has been Top Story.
But I thought you said your place was ransacked by thieves a short while